Hello and welcome back to Nancy Goodaim, the Space Ranger. This is going to be chapter 22. Now, my apologies, there's been a break for about 2 weeks, and that was one because I got a dose, and you can probably hear it on me now, but hopefully the other will be fine. And the other reason was because, like mostly writing, it's a part-time affair, and I went and did a couple of stand-up comedy gigs, which took away from the time writing. So, to make up for that, now here is chapter 22. A hen is a daw is a tree. Magic has a smell, just like a whistling spontallager has a flavour. And just like the taste of a whistling spontallager, the smell of magic can vary. Which means that the smell of magic is different for everyone, and makes it hard to describe. The same is true for tasting a spontallager, because although whistling spontallagers are lovely to eat, the taste will always be a nicer version of the best thing you have ever eaten. Because the cells that bind the spontallager meat to itself rearrange themselves according to the taste buds they come into contact with, making a whistling spontallager the perfect meal every time. The thing with perfect meals, though, is that no two are ever the same. And just like a magician will never tell you that their magic stinks, Jupiterians that dine on spontallagers will never tell you what their spontallager tastes like. Lovely and minty, said Nancy. Are you gone mad, Nancy? Since when is fillet beef minty? Beef, hardly. My creature tastes minty, Bart. Take a bite. Nancy leaned over and handed Bart the plucked Jupiterian creature she had bitten into. Bart took a bite from it, said, "Oh, lad, space travel must be messing with your taste buds, Nancy. That thing tastes like fried beef. Top quality fried beef." Now, just so you know, 80 metres from the shed where Bart, Nancy, and Martian waitress / astronaut Martina Ruddersplitch and the sheriff were squatting, holding a ladder and eating, were 3 large box-shaped robots. 3 relatively self-aware robots. These robots were about the size of 2 wheelie bins stacked sideways and were standing at the top of the bank of the stream that ran alongside Breezy McAspug's treehouse. Now, in saying that these 3 robots were relatively self-aware, it is important to point out that the relative self-awareness extended to everything involved in the transportation of dead spontallagers between the shed at the back of Breezy McAspug's attempt at a garden in the Forest of Proverbs and McAspug's warehouse in Clasmabrone, which mostly involved knowledge of the currents and prevailing weather systems in the Sea of Uncertainty, and little else. For example, there was absolutely no way one of those robots could describe the taste of spontallagers, which was probably for the best, because robots are fans of things that can be easily defined. Such is the way with robots. "A nongular comtongle if ever I tasted one," noted the sheriff, as he tasted the meat. "A meal fit for someone like myself, if ever there was," he added. "There's nothing nongular about that creature," noted Martina. She had also been chewing a dead whistling spontallager, while holding onto a ladder, inside a shed, on Jupiter. European Space Agency Mission Specialist Bart McMorrow and European Space Agency Mission Specialist Nancy McGinley did not reply, mostly because they had no idea what a nongular taste implied, and took it to mean fried steak and mint respectively, and partially because they had both learned it was generally best to ignore what the sheriff did and said. "There is everything nongular about the taste of these creatures, Martina," said the sheriff. "The reason you cannot tell they are so is because you have no taste buds, which is the reason everything you serve in your canteen tastes rotten." 80 metres away, one of the 3 robots at the top of the bank of the stream did something clumsy. It extended one of its 2 metallic legs and wobbled forward. The other 2 box-shaped robots remained still. They were occupied with absorbing solar energy, and would need a full planetary cycle to store enough power to move the remaining 80 metres of their trip from the McAspug warehouse in Clasmabrone to the spontallager storage shed at the back of the roughly cleared ground that Breezy McAspug liked to imagine was a garden. The robot that clumsily wobbled forward was known to itself as FZB-3158. It also knew its spontallager hold was empty, and that a shed full of spontallagers was 80 metres away, and that it had a grappling arm that could load those spontallagers into its empty hold, and that it should transport them to the McAspug warehouse across the Sea of Uncertainty in the seaside settlement of Clasmabrone. Not really stimulating stuff. But for FZB-3158, it was all that it knew. Nancy took back the partly eaten spontallager that she had handed to Bart and continued eating. It still tastes minty to me, she said. Well, you're going to just have to take my word that it is not, Nancy, because the meat tastes like steak. The best of steak. Nancy then did something unfortunate. She said the words, "To you, Bart, not to me. I taste mint." It was one of those inadvertently unfortunate times when a seemingly harmless comment can cause a simmering cauldron of anger inside the head of the listener to boil over. The resulting drama is almost never really about the subject, but is a result of unrelated stress. In the case of European Space Agency mission specialist Bart McMorrow, this was all about the fact that the taste of the fried steak reminded him of all the things he enjoyed on Earth, and the fact that he was now seemingly marooned on Jupiter with little chance of ever going home. Of course, his disaffection was now focused on a perceived affront from his European Space Agency colleague. "And what do you mean by that, Nancy?" "What do I mean by minty?" "You know what I mean by what do you mean?" No, Bart, I don't." "I mean the way you forgot my name in the last chapter, but somehow managed to name-drop Staunton. Sorry, Mission Commander Staunton. Mission Commander bugger off at the first sign of danger, Staunton." "That was the effect of the ladder of insignificance, Bart." "Oh yeah, blame the ladder, that's what they all do." Nancy was about to interrupt Bart and explain further, but her vocabulary and thinking were not fast enough to prevent Bart from saying, "Admit it, Nancy, you think you're better than me." Nancy tried to interrupt for a second time, but all she could manage was the word, "What?" The one-word question had no effect on Bart's quick-fire muddled logic. "I bet you have me bad mouth to the Martians too. Minty. As if a Jupiterian whistling forest creature is going to taste minty." "But it does." "Well, I hope you all had a good laugh. Tell the buck that these things taste minty, huh? I know what you're up to. You're making a monkey out of me." "The creature tastes nongular," noted the sheriff. Nancy made another attempt to rescue her colleague from his misdirected anger. "Bart, you're being paranoid. We've all had a long trip, and walking half the circumference of Jupiter was always going to be stressful. You need to believe me. The creature does taste minty." "Nongular," repeated the sheriff. "It's not. The taste is more tangy than that," interrupted Martina. "You've no taste bud, Martina," replied the sheriff. Clark-chunk, clunk, flump. The three noises caused Bart, Nancy, Martina and the sheriff to temporarily pause their discussion. They had been made by the robot known to itself as SZB-3158, and were a result of it wobbly entering the door of the shed, with the intention of loading up on Spontaligers for a return journey to the McAsburg warehouse across the Sea of Uncertainty in Clasper-Brown. Bart, Nancy, Martina and the sheriff watched the robot. The robot ignored them. Even if it were not for the camouflaging effect of the ladder of insignificance, the robot would not have paid them any attention. They had no obvious relevance to the transportation of Spontaligers from the Forest of Proverbs to Clasper-Brown, and as such were of no interest to FZB-3158. Such is the way with robots. Robot FZB-3158 clattered into the end of the ladder that Bart, Nancy, Martina and the sheriff were holding. The clattering caused robot FZB-3158 to recalculate its position and attempt to avoid the mysterious but irrelevant object it had just encountered. This caused Bart to say, "Those robot things are as clumsy as you can get. Jupiterian engineers must be useless." And the sheriff to disagree by saying, "Those Jupiterians are good engineers. The spacecraft have conquered most of the solar system, except Mars, and wherever you and Nancy are from." Before Nancy could say the word Earth, robot FZB-3158 had recalculated its trajectory, allowing it to take a wobbly sidestep with two round metal legs, and extended its grappling arm to load its storage hold with Spontaligers. It did so rapidly. Bart, Nancy, Martina and the sheriff shuffled and ducked out of the way of the busy grappling arm. "That thing's a liability," said Bart. Robot FZB-3158 measured, logged and classified the noise it detected, and determined the noise to be irrelevant. Robot FZB-3158 continued with its task. Such is the way with robots. "We should step out of the shed till that thing's finished," said Nancy. Nancy's seemingly harmless and well-intentioned comment reminded Bart that he was boiling with anger, and inspired him to continue his misdirected ranting. "Don't try and change the subject, Nancy. You've never really liked me, have you? I hope you all had a good laugh. Hey, let's pretend these things are minty. I bet it's great fun making a fool out of McMorrow." The grappling arm of robot FZB-3158 picked up speed as it frantically gathered Spontaligers. "Nancy is right. That arm is moving very quickly. It's only a matter of time before one of us has her pendular splink poked out," noted the sheriff. "Shut your face, you! I'm talking to Nancy," replied Bert. "And you can't go blaming the ladder for that minty prank, Nancy." "Ha ha, very funny. Well, bollocks to the lot of ye." The sheriff was unsure what bollocks to the lot of ye meant, but took it for an insult. "You watch your mouth, Arthur, unless you want to feel some Martian pain," said the sheriff. "Oh, you don't want that," said Martina, who had crouched into a corner to avoid the flailing arm of the fully occupied with Spontaliger loading FZB-3158, which meant the ladder of insignificance was now angled diagonally across the shed, and that entanglement with the grappling arm of robot FZB-3158 was a sure and certain inevitability. "Ha ha ha, very funny. Look at Bert. Let's get him to say, 50 funks or whatever, the Spontaligers," offered Martina. "Spontaligers," continued Bert. "Taste minty. That'll make a right monkey out of him. Well, you can shove your Spontaligers and your ladder up your holes, because I'm off." "Bert, take a deep breath. The stress of the last few days has got you," advised Nancy. "Oh yeah, has it? Has it really? Well, how about this for stress? I'm off, and I'm taking the ladder with me." Taking the ladder with me involved Bart grabbing it with both hands, yanking it violently out of the hands of Nancy, Martina and the sheriff, and making for the open door of the shed. What happened next happened quickly. The grappling arm of robot FZB-3158 managed to extend itself into and through the space between the third and fourth rungs of the ladder. Robot FZB-3158 quickly detected the weight of Bart and the ladder, which, as it happened, was exactly the weight it needed to make up a full load of Spontaligers, known in the Spontaliger transportation business as optimum bigness. And like all of the self-aware Spontaliger transportation robots belonging to Breezy McGasbug, robot FZB-3158 knew that when optimum bigness is achieved, it must return to the warehouse in Claspabrone. So, robot FZB-3158 attempted to fully close its cargo hold, managed to partly close it, and exited the shed with half a load of Spontaligers, a ladder, and European Space Agency mission specialist Bart McMorrow. Robot FZB-3158 knew only one thing about the tangled mess of grappling arm, ladder, dead Spontaliger, and paranoid human now perched above its cargo hold. And that was that even with a partly closed cargo hold, it would still be possible to successfully return to the warehouse in Claspabrone and complete its task. And completing its task was all robot FZB-3158 wanted from life, such is the way with robots. Martina stood up from the corner of the shed she had been crouching in and asked, "What just happened?" Herself, Nancy, and the sheriff's sudden and rapidly broken grip on the ladder of insignificance rendered the ladder and the still attached European Space Agency mission specialist Bart McMorrow invisible to their minds and thoughts. From Martina's and Nancy and the sheriff's perspective, they were now simply squatting in the shed eating Spontaligers with the naked dead body of Nadie McGasbug in the middle of the floor and a half-filled Spontaliger transportation robot wobbling away clumsily, which, on any other day, might have been remarkable. The fact that Bart had his middle finger stuck up and facing them, on the other hand on the ladder from on top of the robot, was simply an event they did not register, and ignored. I'm not sure what happened there," said Nancy. "It's as if we suddenly lost a good friend. But I don't know. Maybe these Spontaligers can cause hallucinations. Like the halubelberries." "Like what?" asked Martina. "The things Nancy and Bip the Jupiterian stupidly ate," said Sheriff. "And no, Nancy, the Spontaligers are not like halubelberries, the ones in chapter 14, because none of us has been sick, although yes, you are right, we have lost something, and that something is the ladder of insignificance." I just don't know about that, Sheriff. I just found out the ladder existed this afternoon. Why would I feel like I've just lost a friend?" asked Nancy. "Nancy is right, Sheriff," agreed Martina. "The clue is in the name, the ladder of insignificance. The fact that it's gone missing shouldn't cost us a thought." "You are both wrong. We were searching for it to rescue those 3 Jupiterian idiots, so they can help us fetch Bunnadon Flint from out of Sosman Borkstaffel's captivity, or at least help us get a good look at how the great man lives, which I imagine is something to behold. Now, just for the record, the trip to Claspabrone from the Forest of Proverbs is generally long and boring, which is fine if you're a robot, but less so if you're human, which should have mattered to European Space Agency mission specialist Bart McMorrow. But consumed as he was by a perceived slight, and tired as he was from months of space exploration, and distracted as he was with the taste of whistling Spontaligers, boredom was not the foremost thing in his mind, nor was where his impromptu robot straddling journey was going to end, Bart barely looked back as robot FZB-3158 retraced its wobbly steps across Breezy McAsbrook's sorry excuse for a garden and into the stream. He only gave a slight glance towards the shed containing Nancy, Martina and the sheriff as the foot of robot's FZB-3158's propeller replaced the clomp, clomp, clomp of its wobbly footsteps. The three of them are a bunch of wankers, he thought as robot FZB-3158 began pootling its way downstream towards the Sea of Uncertainty. Bart thought it briefly strange that neither Nancy nor Martina nor the sheriff gave him the finger back as he floated away, and even more briefly wondered why his colleague of many years did not even yell a goodbye for old time's sake. Then he remembered the fact that he was still in contact with the ladder of insignificance, which caused him to move it to one side and settle in for another tasty beefsteak-flavoured Spontalager. And, just like that, he was gone. "We just have to rescue Bip, Murkin or Mjokta without a ladder," said Nancy. "Impossible," noted the sheriff. "For I am the strongest, fastest, most intelligent and best of us, and the wizard gained the upper hand on me in combat. You two don't have a hope. No, we're done for. We'll just have to try and make it to Salzman City on our own." "Hobble a Graniker," reminded Martina. "And there's always the theory of the Nogglebon." "What?" asked Nancy. "The theory of the Nogglebon. How can you not know about it, Nancy? It's the most famous Martian story ever written. Where did you go to school?" Reply asked Martina. On Earth." "Oh, sorry, Nancy, I forgot that. Of course. Well, the theory of the Nogglebon dates back to a time when—" I will tell this story, Martina," interrupted the sheriff, "seeing that you are a woman. We don't want to confuse the poor extraterrestrial with a garbled version of the tale. No, not when it comes to the Nogglebon. You're lucky I'm here, Nancy." Right, if you say so, Sheriff," muttered Martina. She then squatted back down, picked up a Spontalager, and began munching on it. "Now, Nancy, the Nogglebon reminds me of me, from what I know of me, and of the Nogglebon, for it was truly wise and strong, and it lived in a time when Martians only grew to half their current size, which meant there was a lot more room, probably twice as much room." Nancy looked to Martina. She gave a sort of help look. Martina just nodded, rolled her eyes, and went back to eating. "Of course, that was long ago, very long ago, before written records, or oral records. Oh wait, it must have been around the time of oral records. Anyway, an evil wizard called Scumbadalostium controlled the planet, and made everyone and everything do his bidding, and his bidding was nothing in particular, but he was particular about it, and insisted it be followed to the word." Nancy's thoughts drifted away from the sheriff's garbled storytelling, and the minty Spontalagers, and the missing ladder of insignificance, and her situation in the shed at the back of a roughly cleared garden in the Forest of Proverbs on the planet of Jupiter. They drifted backwards in time and settled on loss. She knew she had lost something valuable in her immediate past, but could not remember what. Her heart told her it was a friend, but there was more. A lifetime of memories, more valuable things. Things that were more important than space exploration, or demented wizards, or garbled Martian legends. She had the memories, but they were fuzzy. More feelings than anything else. "Scumbadalostium was a very powerful wizard indeed, and generations of Martians lived their lives under his control, because, like all wizards, he lived a very long time. Some say wizards, at least Martian wizards, are immortal. I can't be sure. And anyways, it'd be a hard thing to prove, but..." "Would it be okay if you just skipped to the end of the story, Sheriff?" asked Nancy. "It's just, we should really get on with freeing those three Jupiterians and rescuing our colleagues." "Ah, Nancy, it is easy knowing that you are an extraterrestrial and a woman, because both those things combined make it difficult for you to see that my telling of the theory of the Nogglebon is the one thing that could enable us to rescue those three Jupiterians. Well, the ladder of insignificance might have worked. So too would have an armed spacecraft, or the wizard developing galloping foot rot and dying, assuming he's not immortal, which is possible." Fine, Sheriff, but could you hurry it up a bit?" "I could," nodded the sheriff, "but I won't." Nancy looked out the open door of the shed. The sun was high in the sky, and the sky was clear and blue. The purple vegetation moved in a light breeze. Nancy looked at the Spontalagers on the shelves beside her. She picked up another one and bit into it, and was rewarded with a refreshing minty aftertaste. "And the reason I won't hurry the telling of the myth of the Nogglebon is because it is best to tell stories properly, And that means including all the details, like the fact that the Wizard Scumbottle held a firm belief that every sporting game should end in a draw. This became an endless source of frustration for Nangleball fans throughout the length and breadth of Mars. So much so that the half-size Martians living back then, which incidentally were called Bodangalodians, had very little to entertain them and resolved to do something about Scumbottle. So they stopped believing in him. The sheriff then nodded his head sagely and walked out of the shed. Follow me, for all we need to do is walk back to those Jupiterians and set them free. And if the Wizard Oberon tries to stop us, we will ignore him like the Bodangalodians ignored the Wizard Scumbottle, he said. Remember, a brave Martian knows what he is doing is stupid and pointless, but does it anyway. The same is probably true for wherever you came from, Nancy. Nancy looked to Martina. Is that the end of the story? He never even mentioned, the Nogglebon. Yeah, that's the story, replied Martina. Well, sort of. He didn't mention the Nogglebon by name, but you know how the sheriff is, and... Martina stood up and walked to the door of the shed, checking if the sheriff was out of earshot. Well, she continued, sure, he had the theory of the Nogglebon sort of right, even though he didn't mention it. You know, the whole thing, if you stop believing in magic, it stops existing thing. Right, said Nancy. So why is it called the Nogglebon theory? Oh, that name came from the Nogglebon Aeropulation, the one that wiped out the Bodangalodians. Like I said, the sheriff is terrible at remembering details. We should follow him, though. He talks to the gut. And so it was for the late afternoon on the third day of the first human crewed mission to another planet. An optimally weighted but less than optimally loaded Spontalager transportation robot en route to Calasper, an insignificant ladder and European Space Agency mission specialist Bart McMurrow on top of the less than optimally loaded Spontalager transportation robot, a sheriff with a plan so bad it was close to having no plan at all, mission specialist Nancy McGinley, a Martian waitress/astronaut named Martina Ruddlesplitz, and 3 Jupiterians all in need of rescue from a wizard spell with a distinctive smell in the Forest of Proverbs on Jupiter. Alright, as always, thank you if you listen to that. I don't know how many are hanging on to this story, but I appreciate it if you are. And there'll be another blast next week, and the breaks won't be as long from now on. That's the sickness over, touch wood, for the winter. So again, thank you for listening. Chat to you next week.